So it's really nice to be here and to share with you a bit about what I call the operating system for the future. So this idea of decentralized industry, decentralized society, the way that we've really shifted, particularly in respect to how we form trust and consensus as human beings. We're in the midst of a radical evolution, both of accelerating exponential technologies, but more importantly, the evolution of thought and thinking, how we shape societies, how we shape businesses, and how we interact. And so I want to take us through a little journey, not too far into the past, but what I call these operating systems of society. So from the past, which was mostly localized civilization societies, to now we're in a globalized world, of course, globally connected, with trust that's largely centralized, and then where we're going in the future, which is this decentralized industry concept. So when I say operating systems, do I mean operating systems in computing? Yes, we have them there. We also have them in nature. It's really just the way that resources are advocated. We also have that in society. So our social norms, trust, institutions, schools, right? We have this operating system, and that's really what I'm talking about here when I'm talking about operating systems. So in the past, a little story. So this is a rock. It's a special rock. It's called a zebra rock. That's not the scientific name, but as a child, we'd find these rocks in our backyard. I grew up in Connecticut, so not too far from here. We'd start collecting the rocks. We're like, they're beautiful. Let's hoard them. And it turned into a whole thing where we had buckets and buckets of these rocks because we were using them, my brothers and I, as a currency. And we'd trade the rocks. We'd trade for things that we would sell, like from our closets or our toys. And it turned into something where there's so many rocks, the neighborhood started doing this. So all the kids in the neighborhood started collecting their rocks. If there was a lemonade stand, we'd use the zebra rocks. If the ice cream truck came by, we convinced the guy to accept the rocks, which I'm sure our parents were paying some cold hard cash in the background. But really, we got to this point where there's so many rocks, and there was a little economy forming here that we had no idea the amount of rocks in circulation. People were loaning them. There were different prices and values for these rocks. So we said, we need a bank. And this is my brother, Mike. He was good at math and supposedly responsible. So we made him the bank, the first bank of zebra rocks. And he was in charge of setting the supply, loaning people rocks if they needed them, until one day, I was rummaging in his bedroom, and I find this suitcase under his bed, and it's hoarding rocks that he was keeping for himself and giving to the girl that he had a crush on down the street. Then he ran away with my other brother. We've never seen him again. He's taken the rocks, and that was that. But it's a cute story, right? But I hope I see him telling all these stories about him here on stage. But so, really, it's a little microcosm, an anecdote of how, societies, we had trust-based in community. It was face-to-face. We knew my brother in this case. So communication, exchange, supply chains, they were localized. You would be kind of getting your resources from the people down the street that you knew. And there were problems, obviously, with this operating system. It's extremely limited, expensive, smaller in scope, inefficient. And so we evolved. We went from this village to a connected village to a globally connected village. Again, with the convergence of these technologies, global supply chains, communication networks that brought us to where we are today, this present. So again, communication's digitized. It's global. So we're placing now that trust that perhaps we had face-to-face in proxies, basically. So institutions, governments, financial institutions, educational systems, healthcare systems. So we've kind of deferred that trust. And really, a lot's changed, but not too much, right? We've just taken the problems of the past and we've brought them to the future. And so where we are in the present, anything from our finances to our data to what we buy, to what we eat, to ultimately what we learn and know, is centralized. There are numerous points of both control and points of failure in these types of systems. In turn, the systems are opaque. When you share your data with a third-party company or social network, we trust that, we know what's happening with it, but we really don't know. Or when we buy our food at the grocery store, or we take a medication, we trust that supply chain. and all the steps in between. Silos. Now we have data silos, company silos, communication silos, government silos. So again, all these problems have led to kind of a fragmentation, which ultimately is reactive. So when there's a problem or something happens in the system, it can take days or weeks to figure out where that problem is versus a proactive system. And ultimately, of course, regulations, regulatory compliance. So you think keeping up with these ladies is tough. Keeping up with the regulations and compliance is also tough. And we have all of these safeguards in place, of course, to protect a system that has now evolved to be global in scale, but with trust proxies. And so again, we trust in these systems, but only kind of. And I bring you to 2008, and this is not a talk advocating for Bitcoin, but this was a time where we kind of saw this first start of crisis of trust, particularly in the financial system. And this was also a time that we saw the emergence of a new paradigm, a new way of thinking. And so again, shortly after 2009, the Bitcoin white paper was published, and beyond the idea of a trustless global financial system that it proposed, it's really this idea of a blockchain or of a decentralized way of institutionalizing or moving away from institutions for trust. So that brings us to the future, right? This concept of what could a future look like in this new paradigm. And so again, we take all of these challenges that we've faced in the present and past systems, and we say, look, okay, we're now in this new context, this globalized, connected, digitally mediated world, and what could that look like? And perhaps it shifts to be slightly more open, transparent, proactive instead of reactive. We're seeing now the emergence, of course, of autonomous, anything basically, or AI. So we're really looking at that. And of course, there's an underpinning for this operating system, one technology being a blockchain, which is really, at this point, we probably all know what it is. But at the end of the day, it's a really badass digital ledger, right? If you think about the dawn of human communication, which is right here, it was accounting. It was a tablet, right, to record basically the farming cycles. And that's what allowed for the agrarian revolution to take place and for us to kind of come together in civilizations. And so we can imagine now, we take that, the dawn of communication, this tablet, magical tablet, okay, but now we maybe have a world where you might have your home sale recorded on something, and that's just done instantly without an intermediary. You might have a graduate degree earned, or your food purchase. And so we're thinking about, again, this more open system. And there's a convergence of ideas and technologies here. It's not just about, if you've heard, let's say, crypto or cryptocurrencies or NFTs or digital assets or Web3, this big concept. It's all kind of tied into one, which is this shift to, again, a decentralized future. And I would be remiss if I didn't have a little something here on the metaverse. I know there's the more deep dive on that later. But really, again, we have this idea now where this decentralization is happening, but we also have this talk of the metaverse. What is it? Where is it? Will we all be in the matrix? And so Neil Stephenson, who coined the term in 1992, his book Snow Crash, said it's a persistent virtual world that reaches, interacts with, and affects nearly every part of human existence. So if you take anything away from this concept, it doesn't have to be in some virtual world or in this augmented reality. It's just the idea of almost ubiquitous computing. We all probably have a phone in our pocket at this point in time, maybe an Apple Watch. It's already around you. The data's around you. Every aspect of life. And so again, we're having this convergence now of these technologies. Of course, you have the decentralizing technologies, but you also have technologies like VR and AR, quantum computing, new types of payment rails, 5G, sensors, and it's kind of coming to create this shift into a ubiquitous metaverse-like life. And so every aspect of society is becoming digitized now. And that's why it's important we start thinking about, okay, societies of the past were not like this. And now we're shifting into this new realm. And it has massive impacts on everyday life. So I could go through pretty much every aspect of society here, and we'd be here for 7 hours, so I will not do that. But let's look at money, right? This is a myth. This is what it looks like. It's these rocks or cash, but no, it's zeros and ones. It's data. It's moving. It's neither here nor there or present at all. It could even look like this. It could be a cryptocurrency. It could be a digital asset that any of your kids are collecting, perhaps in Minecraft or Roblox. Maybe that's their money. So we're really looking at a new operating system here for value and the concept of what actually a currency or store of value can be. And again, you might have a cryptocurrency. You might have a central bank reserve currency where central banks are coming into play and digitizing their financial systems, which, of course, it's already happening. If you look here on the countries that are already kind of making the shift or have already launched or piloting a completely virtual or digitized financial system, we're actually quite ahead here. So in the US, you're seeing this with the Treasury exploring digital dollar. We're seeing it also on the tax side. We're seeing it with, of course, using these new payment rails for high-frequency trading or other things. So the idea is, even in financial services, we're seeing this shift, both decentralized, but also to slightly more algorithmic, efficient, connected, autonomous. Identity, this is a big concept, right? I mean, who am I? I'm simultaneously here on a stage talking to all you folks, but I could also be this person, maybe. And I'm also maybe this person. And perhaps off in a different world doing this right now, too, all at the same place and time, right? We have this concept of different identities. And so the question is, what is identity, or let's say KYC for this audience in the future, when the concept of the physical existence is shifting to multi-existences of either digital or virtual representations of the self in different virtual worlds, or even teams, so companies that have teams that are completely anonymous. I think 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago now, Twitter has hired a completely anonymous person identity that's just a string of characters. I'm sure on the back end for their on the ops side, that person has an identity. But the question is, what do we start to do? What does that mean for our lives, our work, our being, our kids' schools, when the idea of identity is shifting? Another area to look at is the concept of private property, asset ownership, right? This is another core pillar of civilization, let's say, or kind of modern society, the concept of private property. And we're now having sort of a new model of what property or ownership is. So a story, Matt mentioned, I'm trained as an anthropologist. I studied or lived in a virtual world called Second Life in 2010. And now, of course, this conversation has come back a little bit. But I was very interested in, what is this world? People, I'd go to concerts there. People are socializing. There were dinner parties. There were dates. There were clothing shopping. And I got a little overzealous with the clothing shopping for my avatar, so I needed to make money. I was like, I need money in this world. And there was even ATMs and bankings where you could come and put your US dollars in and get the Linden dollar, which was the currency in this world, to participate in the world. And I was like, I need money. I can't just keep putting money in. I was, grad student, didn't have a lot of it. And so I was like, well, I like these clothes so much, so maybe I'll make digital T-shirts and sell them to people. It was super easy. You just kind of clip art at the time, not even Photoshop. So the thing is, I started selling these T-shirts and making money, Linden dollars, in the world. And the thing that changed after that, which was completely insane, because at that point in time, all you could do is put money into the system, not take it out. So, great business model for them. But then all of a sudden, these exchanges started popping up, sort of on weird places on the internet or eBay. It'd be like peer-to-peer things. And then they ultimately launched an exchange. So all that money I was making in the world now became cold, hard cash in the real world for me. My mind was blown, because it's like, this is not a real T-shirt. This is not a real world. But for a lot of people, this is a space that they spent time in, and that asset, that idea of that shirt, was quite valuable. And so we're seeing this emergence now of a shift in thinking around property ownership and private property, both who owns it, especially in a digital context. So you don't actually really own anything if it's on the internet. The companies that you're using the platform, own that. And so if we're thinking about a world where, again, it's digitally mediated and ubiquitous, we've got to start thinking about the concept of private property, intellectual property, and what ownership means, right? We, as individuals, should own those assets, whatever they are, whether it's a digital currency, it's a digital T-shirt, it's your digital diploma. All of these things are important. Finally, work, right? The concept of work. We've already experienced this shift. So I don't have to talk about decentralization of, in-office to remote work to hybrid. And even work is changing to be playing video games or doing activities that are not necessarily feeling like work, or in these kind of terrible virtual contexts that aren't quite landing yet. But really the shift when we're thinking of the nature of businesses, of work, and what, in the next 10 to 20 years, the types of businesses you'd be looking at, the question here is not, will the workforces be remote, but will people work for companies in general? And so we're seeing this shift, starting with millennial generation, but more Gen Z, of course, the creator economy. Kids these days are growing up wanting to be YouTube stars and TikTok influencers and Minecraft players versus an astronaut. Hopefully that'll change. But really, we think about this idea beyond the gig economy, beyond just kind of people doing one or two things while in employment with one company. But it's also this idea of a multi-earner area or decentralized companies where you might contribute essentially as a freelancer, but also have many identities, have many participations in many different value-sharing networks. And that's a big thought, not just about companies and investments, but what sorts of companies would be really the things to look at in the future. And so ultimately, every aspect, these are just, I think, 5 aspects of society, but everything is changing. Again, as I said, we could go through pretty much every facet of our lives of society, from supply chains to transportation, entertainment, community, and we'd see these changes. We'd see the shifts towards digitization, decentralization. The question here is, if we're now moving into this day in the life of a not-so-distant future, let's say this is Bob, he gets up, he has his personalized meal delivery shake come to his house that's tailored to his unique genetic code, and he puts on his haptic suit and his VR goggles, and he hops into work. And his work is controlling an avatar in space that's repairing some sort of satellite from, his living room. He's jealous because his friend has, the brain-machine interface, which is way more immersive, so he's wanting that promotion. And maybe his daughter is in the other room, right, in her same suit, and she's visited what was once the White House. Now it's just kind of a virtual representation of it, and you can go on the tours there. She doesn't even have to travel, right? Or perhaps it's slightly less immersive. Maybe this is closer to where we are today, this augmented reality metaverse, again, where perhaps you walk down the street and you see real time, the names of everyone in this room, so I don't need that name tag to recognize you, or you see the pricing of certain things at the store, and it's still a bit overwhelming, right? It's not necessarily a world that I think we want to live in or should live in, but these shifts are happening. And again, I make these points to bring back the point I said, that every aspect of our lives will be connected and digitized. I don't want to put my opinions in here. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but the reality is that's the shift that's happening. It's already started to happen. We spend a lot of time connected through our devices. We're sharing a lot of data on our devices, so it's only going to be more and more prevalent.